no drinking coffee or tea, get ready to go to the temple, serve a full-time mission, go to church every Sunday. I could do all those things. And since I could do them, they gave me like this feeling of gratitude within myself. And I knew God was happy with me. Now, someone that speaks to people who are LDS is they like to use the scriptures when they agree with them, and they like to explain away the scriptures when they disagree with them. But I was so gung-ho about joining the church. I got my patriarchal blessing quickly after I joined. And when I got my physical copy, that sentence was changed. My friends had really built me up as the Christian who had became Mormon, the Christian who had saw the light that other Christians couldn't see and now was LDS. And now he was going to go convert other Christians on his mission.
Kenyon, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited for this.
Okay, well, let's jump right in. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your background, kind of where you grew up, and kind of what your religious background was like?
Yeah, so my family was all over the place. If we start at my grandparents and kind of come down, my dad's grandparents were Catholic for a very long time, and then they left the Catholic Church and became non-denominational Christians. Some point in my childhood, my dad was sort of agnostic, believed in God, but didn't know who he was or where to find him. On my mom's side, my grandpa is Episcopal preacher, and he's been doing that for a long time. He preaches at jails and does a food bank out of his church and everything. My mom was sort of the same. When we were growing up, she was really heavy into like yoga and different practices there. So she taught us about some of like the Hindu and Indian gods and different stuff like that as well. And then me and my brother and my sister, we just kind of grew up agnostic, going to my grandpa's church on my mom's side quite a bit, but not really knowing who God is. And then all my aunts and uncles are all atheists, pretty much. Super hardcore.
That is
so that was sort of
that's quite a mixed bag there. Wow.
When we moved to Moab, Utah, when I was like 12 or 13, I joined a Young Life group down there. One of my close family friends was running it. And so that was sort of my introduction to Jesus. And that's sort of where I got most of my beliefs from about 12 to 16 when I started investigating Mormonism.
Okay, but Jesus, it sounds like he was pretty much absent during that time frame. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you ask my parents, they'd probably say no. But from my understanding of who he is now, I would say that, yeah, it wasn't really there.
And then when you were involved in some Bible studies, right?
Yeah.
And what were your thoughts when you were attending those Bible studies? Were you like, hey, this is the word of God, or hey, this is just another religion?
I wanted to understand what it was. I think I wanted it for the wrong reasons, though. I looked up to a lot of athletes who gave the glory to God when they won or they did whatnot. And I saw them and I wanted to follow that path because I thought it looked cool. And, they obviously had something there that like maybe I wanted. But as far as the Bible studies go, I remember we read the book of Deuteronomy, and I was like a 14-year-old snotty kid. And I just thought it was funny that it was called Dude-eronomy. So I didn't get very much from them,
okay,
to be honest.
Okay. And then how long were you attending Young Life for? Like how many years did that last for?
Pretty much up until I joined the Mormon Church. So this was 4 or 5 years. And since a close family friend was the one that started it, I ended up being like one of the student leaders pretty quickly. So though my faith was pretty surface level and shallow, if any, like I was the guy that was getting other people to go to the groups and go to the events, go to the retreats and different things like that.
Okay. So you just mentioned that you eventually joined the LDS Church. Spoiler alert. So go ahead and walk me through what led up to that decision.
We were big athletes growing up. Basketball was sort of my main sport. My dad coached our teams. it was something that was really important to me. And I thought I was going to go on and at least play some like junior college and have it pay for my schooling and different things. My junior year, I tore my ACL,
Mm.
which put me in a place where I was really questioning kind of everything that had gone on in my life. I thought I had kind of had this like sports Jesus relationship where I was like, I know who Jesus is a little bit, and he's gonna like lead me on this path, and this path involves basketball. And then when that happened, it kind of blew that plan up. So I was angry at a God I didn't really know too well, but nevertheless angry. And when you grow up in Utah, a lot of your friends are LDS,
Hmm.
and I had some of them start to notice that I was visibly upset and sad, and they started talking to me about their faith. I had also met a girl around that time who was LDS, and so they just kind of started introducing me. I started to feel like I had purpose, and because I didn't have a very strong faith base in what I was doing, and now I had all these people interested in me and teaching me about things that started to become super appealing, and that's when it kind of started.
Okay, gotcha. And then as you were like kind of learning, like did missionaries teach you during this time, or did your friends teach you, or how did you go about learning LDS doctrine and whatnot?
Yeah, so it mostly was this one particular family, this family of this girl that I was talking to, and then kind of a group or three or four different friends and their families. I'd go over to their house, I'd ask them questions, different things like that. And eventually these people in my life were like, you should really meet with the missionaries. Like if you're vibing with this and if you like it, you should get baptized. To do that, you need to meet with the missionaries. And one thing you need to know about my parents is though we come from a lot of different backgrounds of different religions, one of the big no-nos was Mormonism. They had warned me about people trying to convert me growing up and different things like that. So I didn't tell them about any of this. And I started meeting with the missionaries at the houses of these friends. I can look back on that and see how problematic it was that like a 16, 17-year-old kid is like going behind his parents' back to
Mm.
uh, do things at other grown adults' houses. But at the time, I felt like this weird persecution complex where it
Mm.
was like, you're going to lose your father and mother for God, and like
Hmm.
unless you deny them and follow me. Parts of the doctrine as I was meeting with the missionaries that really kind of stuck with me were the idea that we could become like God one day, that there was sort of this baptism was the doorway and the entrance, and then there was this whole other progression of different things that we would go on like checking off and achieving until we became like him. That was what, probably 8 years ago now, and the target has moved. Now that when I talk to my Mormon friends about it, it changes. It's no, we're not gonna be gods, but like gods, or you know what it's like as you've
Hmm.
kind of talked with them. But that was really interesting to me, and then also just that like I could more or less earn my salvation. Like I knew what I had to do for God to be pleased with me.
Hmm.
And I was in a point in my life where I knew I was disappointing my parents, even though they didn't know I was meeting with the church. I knew I was disappointed with myself. So the fact that someone could give me like a rule book and say, like, no drinking coffee or tea, get ready to go to the temple, serve a full time mission, go to church every Sunday, I could do all those things. And since I could do them, they gave me like this feeling of gratitude within myself. And I
Hmm.
knew God was happy with me. And that was kind of another appealing part, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you mentioned the idea of earning your salvation, and I know any Latter-day Saint listening to this right now is going to have the knee-jerk reaction of saying, "No, Kenyon, what are you talking about? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
not what we believe." But what I've kind of come to kind of understand would be Jesus died on the cross, and that gives us the free gift of entering into just heaven, into one of the three kingdoms. But
Mm-hmm.
the specific point you're kind of referring to is getting in the celestial kingdom in the presence of God and qualifying for eternal life. Is that accurate?
Oh, 100%. And, I don't know. I guess we are. It's hard because you have to speak a certain way. We're speaking to Christians about LDS, and you have
Yes.
to speak a certain way to LDS members when you're talking about Christianity. So,
Hmm.
so it's difficult. But the best way I would describe it is like the parable of the workers in the field. You know how the boss, he brings in different people at different times during the day, and at the end of the day he pays them all the same amount. And the
Mm-hmm.
people who started earlier in the day were like, what the heck, like we should have got paid more because we started earlier. And he says like, are you mad at my generosity?
And I
Yeah,
think what you might be referring to is that's symbolic of anyone who believes in Jesus is like they receive that free gift of eternal life, which is living in the presence of God. Is that kind of where you were kind of going?
100%. And so like there's only one payment. there's not uh there's not like 33% payment, 66% payment, and 100% payment. You're either justified or you're not. You're with God or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
There's not degrees to it. And that's the distinction that Mormon or LDS people make,
Mm-hmm.
where they say, yeah, Jesus died for you, but based on your work is where you land. They
Mm-hmm.
like turn it into a levels game where really it's a black and white, either in or out.
Right. Yep. As you were learning things, was there anything that did not sit well with you? You didn't think made sense at the time, or did you pretty much like a lot of the things you were hearing?
I liked most of it. The one thing I could not get behind for the longest time was Testimony of Joseph Smith. I think they've changed this since, because you have to do an interview when you get baptized for you to be able to be baptized or not. And one of the questions, at least when I was going through the process, was, do you have a testimony of Joseph Smith as the restorer of the gospel, or however they put it?
Mhm.
And I prayed and prayed and prayed to have like this good feeling about Joseph Smith as a prophet of God, as someone who translated the Book of Mormon. And I just never felt it. I never felt like he was, uh, it always gave me not good feelings. And so when I brought this up to the missionaries I was talking to, they said, well, he translated the Book of Mormon. So do you like the Book of Mormon? And I was like, yeah, I love the Book of Mormon. It's super cool. And they were like, well, then that's your testimony of him, because if you like what he's created, then you must like him as well. My family had exposed me to a lot of the history of the Mormon church and stuff that Joseph Smith did. And I think because I knew that, I really couldn't get behind him. But the missionaries gave me a really nice, like, kind of mental gymnastics out of having to like agree with that just by agreeing with the Book of Mormon.
Hmm. Gotcha. You're now in the LDS Church. At what point did it start entering into your mind of going on a mission?
Oh, as soon as I joined,
Right away.
uh, yeah, right away. I got baptized. My parents weren't there. They found out about the whole thing. I got baptized 2 weeks after I turned 18. My parents weren't sure they wanted me staying at the house with my siblings once I was LDS. Since then, it's been worked out and we have a great relationship now. But I did a little bit of like couch surfing on some friends' couches. They weren't going to help me with college because I had joined the church, because they were afraid that I was going to be paying all the money that they were helping me with to tithing and different
Mm,
things like that. So like I was super in it and I wanted to do anything for it. And the next step was to serve a mission. I felt like I was this kid who was a Christian, and my friends had really built me up as the Christian who had became Mormon, the Christian who had saw the light that other Christians couldn't see,
mhm.
and now was LDS. And now he was going to go convert other Christians on his mission. And like I slid into that, and that is what I wanted as soon as I got baptized.
Real quick, if this video is blessing you, would you just do me a favor and subscribe to the channel? That would really help get the word out about this ministry. Thank you so much for your support. Mhm. And real quick, before we get into your mission, I wanted to touch a little bit on the patriarchal blessing.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Would you be willing to kind of explain what the patriarchal blessing is and how that may have kind of shaped your vision for your own future?
In the LDS Church, they have different leaderships. I guess I'll start with this. They have different leadership titles, and one of them is a patriarch. And a patriarch is basically someone who, when you're young in the church, you go to and you say, hey, I want a patriarchal blessing. And they lay their hands on your head, and they give you, they speak for like 15 minutes, or some speak shorter, some speak longer. And the words that they say are basically like, from my understanding, what I was taught was it was coming straight from God. Then their assistant, which is typically their wife, listens to the recording, types it up, and hands it to you as a copy. I wish I would have prepared by grabbing mine so I
That's
could read you
okay.
some
That's okay.
parts of
I
it.
don't know if this was on the printout, so you got to pass on that one. So
Okay. But I was so gung ho about joining the church. I got my patriarchal blessing quickly after I joined. But when I went down, I had a little interview with the patriarch before he gave me my blessing. And I told him about how much I wanted to serve a mission, how much I wanted to lead in the church, how this was like my whole life. And basically, he said all those things in my patriarchal blessing, that I'd be a great leader, that I'd be a faithful servant, that I would be persecuted, that God would be happy with me. So it was
mhm.
basically all the things that like I had already thought. The one funny thing is I didn't tell them beforehand that I was dating a girl. The girl ended up becoming my wife. We're married now for 4 years. It's been awesome. And in my patriarchal blessing, when he said it, he said, "You have not met yet, but will one day find the woman that you'll marry." And afterwards, I was distraught because this girl I was dating, I absolutely loved. And so I told them, I was like, "You said it this way. Does this mean that the person I'm dating, I'm not going to marry? Like, should I just break up with her now?" And they were like, "No, don't worry about it." And when I got my physical copy, that sentence was changed. The wife who was
Wow.
recording, who typed it out, changed it to, "One day you will marry like a good, faithful woman," or something like that. So
Wow. Okay.
that's like
Interesting.
the funny experience from mine. I remember being so distraught and then getting the physical copy and not thinking and not being like, "No, I know I heard it this way," but being too afraid to ask because I didn't want to like say call an elder out or something like that. Or
Yeah,
yeah, you know,
that is interesting. And so the way you understood your patriarchal blessing, I mean, you were hearing a lot of the things that you wanted to hear,
100%.
and did you kind of view this as like a transactional exchange? Like, hey, you will be given these things. This is kind of like a prophecy sort of a thing for you personally. If you commit your life to the LDS Church, if you do that, then you will get these things and that sort of a thing. Or how did you kind of interpret that?
I mean, I kind of interpreted it as sort of like a vision for the future. So I didn't really see it as like, "Oh, if you do this, you get this," but
Mm,
more in the fact of like, I remember for the first 6 months of my mission, my family didn't write me, like they didn't email back and forth with me. And my mission was in Argentina, and there were some days that we had to travel by bus for like 6, 7 hours. And I would bring it with me and I would read it and just cry because I
mm,
was so like sad and separated from my family. But I knew I had all these promises waiting for me as long as
mhm,
I just kind of held faithful. So
mhm.
it was like, it was my stabilizing vision to keep me on. Which, now saying that, it does kind of sound like I was using it as a contract, but I didn't conceptualize it that way. It was more
Okay.
of a like, all the pain's going to be worth it sort of thing.
Hmm. Yeah, totally. Okay. You get ready for your mission, and you mentioned you went to Argentina. Before we get there, tell us a little bit about the Missionary Training Center, also called the MTC, and
Yeah.
what was your experience like there?
Oh man, I loved it. It was a ton of fun. I was a commodity because I was a Christian who had joined the LDS Church. So the MTC is like the training center where you go. If you speak English, you're there for 2 weeks just to kind of figure out how to teach the lessons, which is like a literal book that they give you called Preach My Gospel. I don't know if they still give you it, but they run you through how to kind of have the lessons, and you have mock lessons with people. But if you speak a foreign language, I think you're there for 6 weeks. So we spent a lot of our time working on starting to pick up Spanish and learn how to preach in Spanish. I had a great time. I told everybody about my conversion. There's like a leadership hierarchy in there too. So there's like, you get put in a basically like a floor dorm with a bunch of other missionaries who are going to similar areas as you. And then you get put in these things called districts and then zones. And then like 3 or 4 different districts make up a zone. So like there's 6 or 7 missionaries in a district, then there's 3 or 4 districts in a zone, and they give like leadership roles. So I was the district leader for my MTC, and then 2 weeks in that I became the zone leader for my MTC. So I just kind of watched over all the other missionaries,
Mhm.
and it definitely fed my ego. So I enjoyed it. It was way fun, and I got to learn a little bit of Spanish. So that was a pretty good experience.
Okay. So when you get to Argentina, how did everything start out for you?
I hit the ground really wanting to run pretty fast. I remember it was like a 18-hour flight down there and then a 12-hour bus ride to the city that we were in. And I remember being on the bus and looking at the lady next to me and just trying to build up the confidence to say that, like, hi, my name's Elder Birdwell and Jesus loves you or something like that
Mhm.
next to her. And I tried. She totally didn't understand me. My first area, I was with a pretty cool guy. He's a friend. I consider him a friend till even today. We really hit the ground running. Really, kind of your goal is just to get out there and preach the gospel and baptize as many people as you can. And in my first area, we met older gentleman, and we started teaching in his house. And what you have to do is you have to teach all 6 lessons. Then you have to get them to attend church twice. That was my mission's rules. And after that, they could be baptized. So we taught this guy all the 6 lessons. We got him to attend church twice, and then we got him to commit to baptism. And on the day we were walking down to his house, this is like rural Argentina. So we didn't have cars, we didn't have bikes, we just walked. We're walking down to his house, and I turned to my elder, or to the elder who was my kind of leader. Like, he's the guy that I'm looking up to for guidance. And I said, like, Elder, I have a bad feeling about this. Like, I don't think this guy's ready to accept Jesus and the church into his life. Like, we barely known him for 4 weeks. And he turned to me and he said, Elder Birdwell, like, this is what we're here to do. Like, we are here to bring people to God, and they can't get closer to God unless they're baptized in the Mormon church. So he may not be 100% ready, but he's ready enough because he's committed to it. And we go and we knock on his door, and he doesn't come out. And we bring a member by, and the member starts talking, or gets him to open his door. And the member later on translated for us, but he was basically like, these white guys won't stop coming to my house. They kept trying to get me to do stuff, and I'm actually really afraid of them because they, like, won't not let me. Like, every time they leave, they say, we're coming back this day, and I don't have a choice whether or not they come back. And now they're gonna, like, throw a party for me at their church, and I don't want to go. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. And like, sure enough, my gut instinct was right. Like, he was nowhere close. But that sort of set this precedent of, like, we're here to baptize and we're here to bring members. And if that guy wasn't ready to be a member, then just, like, push him off to the side. We're not going to think about him. We're going to go find people who want to join the Mormon church.
That specific guy, it sounds like he got the impression that you guys were kind of almost like being pushy a little bit, but I'm sure that's not what you guys were intending to be like.
No, I don't think you're intending to be that way. And I think everybody has a different mission. I think different LDS kids have different experiences on their mission. The rumors on my mission is that we weren't baptizing enough, and they were going to shut our mission down and dissolve it into a couple different missions. So our president was super, super, like, he harped a lot on our baptismal numbers every month. It's weird because you talk about it and it's sort of like a corporation, where it's like they harped on our sales numbers. But in line with what I was doing in the MTC, I worked my way up in on my mission pretty well. I was a district leader pretty quick over a group of missionaries, and then I was a zone leader pretty quick. And then they actually sent me to the central office of the mission to be the assistant to the president of the mission, which is the older gentleman that runs the mission. And if anyone who's LDS is listening to this, they'll think, like, assistant to the president is like the the main guys that follow the president everywhere. I was the guy that did all the books. So I tracked all the baptisms and tracked everything. And I would call elders and be like, so this zone says that they're going to baptize 2 people this week. Like, are those baptisms still on, or are they not, or whatnot? So that I was kind of the behind the scenes guy, checking on all the baptisms, seeing what numbers we were at, seeing if we were hitting our goals and different things like that. But it would be like talking to at least 50 people a day. So, like, on the street or knocking on doors. We wanted to teach 3 lessons a day. And we would all, like, most missions now, they do them on iPads and different things. We just had little notebooks that we would mark all these things down during the day. And basically it was just like, if you hit your goals, the the baptisms will come, you know.
Remind me, what year was this that you were serving your mission?
This was I graduated in 2017, 2018, 2019 to 20, no, 2018 to 2020 was the years I was on my mission.
Okay. And how often were you talking to your family at this point? Was it because I know these days missionaries can call once a week. Believe it's on Mondays. They can call home. Was that the same thing for you?
So when I started my mission, we had an hour to send emails on Mondays. And then when I got to 9 months on my mission, the president of the church at the time changed it to where we could video call with our family as much as we wanted to on Monday. So
Nice. Okay.
it changed halfway through.
Gotcha. Well, that's nice that they made it more easier for you guys to talk to your family. I'm sure that makes life a lot more enjoyable for missionaries. While on your mission, do you remember getting bashed or persecuted very often?
Never. I would say if they were Christian, we most likely avoided them. Very rarely did we get into conversations with people who were believing Christians. A lot of people that we would talk to would be sort of like how it is out here in the South. They're culturally Christian, but they're not, you know, they don't go to church or anything, or they just don't believe in God in general. If we walked up on someone who was like new as stuff, we would be like, "Hey, thank you. Obviously, you know, we're here to bring people to Christ, and you're not wanting to listen. So have a good one."
Hmm.
Uh, the one person that did approach us on the street who was Christian and told me that I was wrong personally, he is a huge reason why I ended up leaving. And I don't know if we'll get to that later on in the interview, but yeah, literally the one time it happened was like the crack in the armor that eventually exploded the whole thing.
Were there a lot of Catholics in Argentina, or was it pretty evenly distributed between like Protestants and Catholics?
Not many people I ran into were super like would identify with a specific religion or a specific church or anything.
Mhm.
There were some crazy ones down there. Like religion does run kind of crazy where there's like a lot of like extortion and bad stuff that happens. I don't know if you've seen online lately, but there's a church in Mexico that's selling plots of land in heaven right now that you can like purchase. And so that kind of stuff happened a lot where I was from, where there'd be like these little startup churches where a pastor would be using faith to make money. So I think a lot of people were jaded from religion and kind of skeptical of us at first, but when they saw that we were just there to talk about God, I think it kind of dropped a lot of people's guards, except for the real Christians who like knew who we were and knew what we were about.
Mhm.
And those ones are the ones we try to avoid.
Okay, so where would you say that there are a number of Christians that kind of gave you a bad taste in your mouth as like after talking with them, or aside from the one you were mentioning a couple minutes ago, did you kind of have a negative view of Christians as a result of a lot of those interactions?
Not a negative. I felt bad for them. Like I thought I had came from Christianity into the truth. So when we did meet with the few Christians that we did meet with, it was more just like either they're arrogant and they don't know the truth, they're blinded by their ideology, so they'll never be able to see kind of what we're believing, or like maybe we'll plant the seed for them to one day like realize that the church is true, you know. So that was more of the thing. I was just like, man, I'm sad that you're so blinded by, you know, Satan's lies or your fake church that like you can't see what we're saying.
Hmm.
And so to any LDS person that's watching, I mean, obviously the rhetoric behind that has kind of gone away from that. But like being that I joined the church, like one thing that I shared with people in the first lesson is we talk about Joseph Smith having a vision where he sees God the Father and Jesus Christ, and they say that all other churches are abominations and that they draw close to people with their mouths, but their hearts are far from them. And as a missionary, I took that very seriously. Like if all other faiths are wrong, then they're wrong, and there's only one right one, and there's right and there's wrong. I've ran into a lot of either Mormon friends or people nowadays who say like, you know, let's agree to disagree. Like, we're Christians too, or we believe sort of the similar things, and no, you guys are going to heaven too, just like a different level and stuff. But when I was a member, at least, in I feel like it's changed even since then. But like, there was an understanding in my brain that we were different. We were not just Christians. We were the correct ones, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean the quote that you're talking about from Joseph Smith, that's from the Pearl of Great Price from church history, like the last
Yeah.
book
Mm-hmm.
in that book, and that's literally what it says. But
Mm-hmm.
what I've kind of found is that Latter-day Saints today, missionaries, they'll say, "Oh no, it's not the churches that are false or that are an abomination. It's specifically the creeds." So they have a lot of the truth, but they also have some things that are, yeah, like an abomination, like those the creeds and whatnot. Is that kind of what
Mm-hmm.
you've experienced too?
Yeah, it was. And even, I mean, you'll read, if you got way into it, and like, I actually, I'll show you this. Like, this was my quad
That's
from
your
my mission.
quad. There it
Yeah.
is.
Uh, I'll show you some stuff in it. Like, I was legit. I'm a big Bible marker, so like, I'll just open up to a random page here, and like, this was my Book of Mormon. Like, it was well marked. I enjoyed reading, and I read like the different teachings of the prophets, and like earlier prophets like Brigham Young and people like that, they made a distinction, like, no, people who aren't LDS are Gentiles, or they don't believe in the truth. And it seems like there was a very big understanding that there was a huge difference, and now that difference is very, very small, or tried to like be pushed aside.
Hmm. And I believe it's Second Nephi 29:6 where it says a Bible. Only a fool says all we need is a Bible and we need no more Bible. And so,
Uh-huh.
I mean, if we're going to look at the Book of Mormon, I mean, from what I know, I believe that the Bible is sufficient. Therefore, their own scriptures saying I'm a fool. Yet
Oh yeah.
but they want me to accept them as brothers and sisters in Christ while calling me a fool at the same time. So it's a little inconsistent, right?
Oh man, dude. Since I've become Christian, like, we're non-denominationalists. I'm still trying to come into my faith and kind of see different aspects of Christianity that I believe or I can understand through biblical teaching. I'll run across people who I don't necessarily agree with, and we will have great conversations within the word where like I learn things and they learn things. I don't call them a fool, they don't call me a fool. We just both love Jesus. We hold to who he was, and we're just trying to get a better understanding of who he is through the word.
Hmm.
That, compared to like the like, I mean, you know it, like, you meet with Mormon missionaries, the types of conversations are not the same. It's more of like a trying to pull you out of lies, but at the same time say like, no, we're all cool, like we're the same thing. The types of conversations are very different.
Hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about the one Christian that you did mention and how it sounds like he left a good taste in your mouth and that he gave you something to chew on. What was that conversation like?
He has it written down on a piece of paper, and he finds another set of missionaries, gives the piece of paper with the note on it, and says, hey, the tall fat elder, give it to him. He's wrong about this. They teach you how to kind of get around things in the Bible, right? Like, it's either translated bad or hold to your testimony of the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon's the more perfect book of the two. But for some reason, it just stuck with me. For the first time in my life, I read a verse in the Bible, plain as day, plain as text, that was telling me that something that I believed or was doing was not correct. God, I was like, I believe that this is your church, even though I'm having all these doubts, and just help me make sure that this is the right decision. Just lead me forward.